This is Kennington Park in London. I was actually born about half a mile from here, and for the first 12 years of my life, on my frequent wanderings through London, I would often come through this park. For the next 6 years of my life, I lived about 400 yards away, and almost every day, certainly every day that I went to school, I would come through this park. And one thing I often used to notice was that the flower beds, those on my right hand side that we're coming to, all seem to be a little bit concave. They seem to dip down from the sides into the centre. I was also aware of a story people used to talk about of a great disaster here in Kennington Park during the Blitz, about a shelter being destroyed. But as times moved on, people stopped talking and people stopped asking, and I really never knew very much about it until I came across an article, and it was talking about London's forgotten tragedies. But the reason why all these flower beds are sort of concave is they are built on top of what during the war were communal shelters, very large shelters built in this park. And one night, one shelter that we're coming to had a direct hit from a high explosive bomb. The War Ministry had ceased talking about numbers of casualties. It felt it was demoralising to talk about the casualties in terms of tens or twenties or hundreds or thousands. So losses were said to be low, medium or heavy. Eventually 60 names was published of the dead from the Kennington shelter disaster. And when I read some of those lists of names, the thing that horrified me was that a lot of them would have actually been my neighbours had I been born a few years earlier. But what it didn't say was, and what the War Ministry didn't say was, there's another 40 odd casualties that could not be identified. In total, there was in the order of over 120 people killed when a bomb hit this shelter. But because of the carnage that took place around and was taking place in London at that time, they were never named and probably never actually identified. And I always think that was a very sad and sobering fact, that people died without a burial place. It was a sort of barbarity that we associate with the First World War, but sadly it was also in the Second World War. And this was a stone erected around about 2003 or 4. That it's a piece of Caithness stone, and history, despite wrenching pain, cannot be unlived, but can be faced and learnt from, so it doesn't happen again. A piece of Caithness stone is all what reminds us of the unimaginable horror that happened at this spot during the war. Well, from here I am going to walk to the Oval Kennington, and from there up to Vauxhall Bridge, then along the River Thames, over Millbank and along the South Bank, and eventually to Westminster Bridge, the House of Commons, Westminster Tube Station and my tube home. Well, here we are at Kennington Oval, and just across the road there you see the magnificent church of St Mark's, Kennington. This was a very important church in my childhood, whilst most of the front facade and the interior survived the war intact, it was not the same for round the back of the church. High explosive bomb landed nearby and destroyed probably a third of the rear of this church, and as we walk around you see where the old and the new comes in. But what it left behind was massive blocks of masonry and stone, and for children in this area this became a natural playground. We could go tunnelling, we could play hide and seek, we can climb over it. And yes, this was certainly one of my great childhood treasures, From this point on, you will see how from the end of this part here, you see where the new part now begins. And all this rear was just a mass of jumbled, huge blocks of masonry. So there we go, my childhood playground. Now just walking around from Oval Tube Station, and in front is the Oval Cricket Ground, Kennington Oval, home of Surrey County Cricket Club, a first-class cricket venue used for holding international test matches. In my day, that certainly was not the facade. It was a pair of old brown gates, and where we now see floodlights because we have the modern game certainly in the 1950s, it was only test matches played here. And as we're walking around the Oval Cricket Ground along Harleyford Road, to the left we have Harleyford Road Estate. One of my very favourite aunties used to live here, and she was an extremely popular lady every time Surrey was playing at home or there was a test match played, because her flat looked right into the ground. Well, we're now just at Vauxhall Station, a few yards before Vauxhall Bridge. And before going over Vauxhall Bridge, I'm just going to cross over the road here and walk through what is called now Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens. Alright. Vauxhall Pleasure Gardens is now just a small fragment of what used to be here. In Regency times, it was a major location, major place for people to come. It would have broad avenues, all with picturesque lighting, candlelights, of course. It'd be a great meeting place. There'd be great concerts held here. By Victorian times, it had fallen into misuse, being virtually closed, and as Charles Dickens would describe, mostly used by people of rather unsavoury occupations. I think we all know what he meant by that. I'm now just crossing under the rails from Vauxhall, going into Waterloo Station a few miles further to the east of here, and just walking back to the River Thames, the Albert Embankment, and then just back on myself to walk over Vauxhall Bridge. The Albert Embankment was created by Joseph Bazalgette, the architect of London's great Victorian sewer system, tasked with cleaning up the River Thames as well as cleaning up parts of London as well. He actually narrowed the Thames by creating great embankments on either side, underneath which ran the great tunnels of the Victorian sewage system. And there in front of me as well you see the home of the Special Intelligence Service, MI6. I'm now just walking over Vauxhall Bridge. Looking to my right, over there is Lambeth Bridge, and straight in front is Millbank, which we're going to be walking along, going from Millbank through to Westminster Bridge, through to Lambeth Bridge. Vauxhall Bridge itself is quite an ancient bridge. It's a Class 2 protected building, considered to be a quite at-risk target during the Second World War. And just as we step down onto Millbank here, you see buttresses where a temporary steel bridge was built in case of destruction to Vauxhall Bridge. Walking along Millbank, all this used to be the old Lambeth Penitentiary, Millbank, and after being closed, it was a horrible prison, had a horrible reputation, and after being closed in the Victorian era, it became home to lots of comfortable family houses, and the Tate Gallery, which is over the road there, now one of 4 Tate museums, that is the Tate Britain, donated to the country by Henry Tate of Tate and Lyle fame. Henry Tate, a rich sugar refiner, one of the richest men in the country, made anonymous donations to build that gallery and donated all his 19th century collections of art to it. And we're walking down now towards Lambeth Bridge. In front of us is the Millbank Tower, horrible glass modern And finally, building. Before reaching Lambeth Bridge, we come to Thames House. Had a number of uses, but today it's now the home of those other spooks, MI5. Very nice gardens along here though, and now we're just walking down to Lambeth Bridge. We're going to cross Lambeth Bridge to Lambeth Palace. And stepping down on the south side of Lambeth Bridge, we see in front of us Lambeth Palace, which is the home of the Archbishop of Canterbury. No doubt whilst praying for the survival of St. Paul's, he would have also been praying for his own survival during the Blitz, for 2 bombs landed in the road right outside the palace. But anyway, another palace over the river there, that's the Palace of Westminster, otherwise known as the Houses of Parliament. And if anybody needs divine providence, they do at the moment. And as we walk down towards Westminster Bridge and St Thomas's Hospital and the Covid Wall, we come to another memorial, and this is to the women of SOE in the Second World War. And SOE and the women played an awful lot of 3 George Crosses awarded to women of the SOE, and on one side we have a plaque to Violette Jarbo, George Cross, who died in Ravensbrück after being caught and brutally interrogated by the Gestapo. But when I used to walk to school, I used to walk past the house where Violette Jarbo was brought up. And this is the Covid Wall that we're coming to. Thousands of hearts painted on what is actually a wall of St Thomas's Hospital, and people are invited to write in the memory of a lost loved one due to COVID. Some very, very sad reminders of the cost of the pandemic. Such a lovely thought to have such a long stretch of wall for people to just come and write the names of loved ones that they lost. And now we're crossing over Westminster Bridge towards the Houses of Parliament, the Abbey, Westminster Abbey, and my tube station from where I'm going to get a tube home to Abbey Wood, which is where I've parked my camper van. This time of year, so I say, as I fight my way through these crowds, and it really is very, very difficult to walk over this bridge because there are just so many tourists. But as I walk over it, I will say thank you for watching. My next video is going to be from here down to London Bridge and probably Tower Bridge. I tried to make each of these videos about 5 miles long. Lovely walks, lovely city, most beautiful city, you know, from when I remember it to being so dirty and bomb destroyed to what it is now, so vibrant and such a wealth of history. Magnificent. And if I sound like a very proud Londoner, well, I am. So with that view of the loony bin, I'll say thank you.